Now, with Inauguration Day almost upon us, you could say this world seems to be flipped upside down, especially when it comes to Republican and Democrat and one Donald Trump. Case in point, the head of China's Communist Party, let me underscore that again, Communist Party, President Xi Jinping, is urging the U.S. and the UK to embrace free trade. And the person coming to Donald Trump's defense today, he hasn't been so keen on free trade, Russian President Vladimir Putin. What the heck is going on, to quote one Donald Trump again? Our panel, Alex Burns, CNN political analyst and national political reporter with the New York Times, Danielle McLaughlin, Democratic strategist and author, Ron Christie, former special assistant to President George W. Bush, and MJ Lee, CNN political correspondent. Thank you so much. I mean, Ron, first to you. I mean, come on. It's not like the guy you worked for didn't have some rough patches there in Washington. What are Republicans thinking? Are they apoplectic? If you look at what Senator McCain said, it's worse than they thought.
I think the Republican establishment is so confused by what Donald Trump has brought. I mean, you never thought he would win of a field of 17 people, that he'd be the one who emerged. And what I think is going to be very interesting to see is, how does Donald Trump work with Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House? How does he work with Mitch McConnell? Can Republicans, now that we control everything in Washington, get along? It's going to be a very interesting next couple days.
Danielle, in terms of what's going on the Hill right now, do you think there is this fear with the Democrats that everything that they worked for, and they thought that even someone on the Republican side might uphold? We're talking about things that Barack Obama would say, we're all on the same team here. Donald Trump sometimes doesn't seem to be playing as if everyone's on the same team when it comes to what we'll call the new Trump order.
Right, and I think the new Trump order is, to your point, very difficult to explain, because he is not an ideologue, and you see sort of streams of republicanism and streams of democratic ideals with them. I think things like infrastructure, there's going to be, we hope, something that we can work together on. This idea that he's going to spend half a day unsigning a lot of the executive actions and the executive orders that President Obama put forth is concerning. But what I hope we will see is, as we have seen with things like the wall, and even this idea of mass deportations, or other things that have been put out on the campaign trail, I think we will see Americans stand up and say, this is maybe not what we want. So some of these things from the Obama legacy might actually stay.
How does he gauge that, though? Because on something like the wall, or on something like 35% tariffs, he said, no, that's what I said I was going to do. That's what I'm doing.
Well, he approaches, I think, every role he's in as though it's being president of the Trump organization, right? And I think he's going to run very quickly into the limitations of the presidency, that you actually can't run government like a business. So it's not as simple as saying, let me look at the books and, requisition some money from over here and put it into the wall over here, and we're done, right? You can't do that. Congress has the power of the purse. Congress would be the entity that would pass some kind of massive tariff, as he has suggested. And there's really no indication that even Republican members of Congress outside the establishment, Ron was talking about the establishment being confused, there are folks on the sort of ideological right wing of Congress who look at some of the things Trump is proposing for trade, some of the ways he's talking about health care, and they're saying, this is actually not what we signed up for at all.
And you think that perhaps they had an inkling of that going in, though, didn't they, MJ? And okay, so everyone's been reading Art of the Deal, right? Donald Trump's book. It's true. It is required. It's required. I don't even know if he remembers what he wrote in that book, but everyone else is reading it. MJ, when you look at it, this is his strategy. Upending the world, the new Trump order, that's his strategy. That's the way he thinks he's going to get the best for America.
Yeah, and I think that on Capitol Hill, Alex just mentioned the healthcare debate. Republican lawmakers are growing increasingly frustrated because they are seeing Trump do the typical Trump thing, where he gets out of everyone and makes these big, sweeping, and very sort of ambitious promises on Obamacare, but Republican lawmakers were not actually told in advance that he would be making those promises. He tells the Washington Post over the weekend, this is going to be an insurance plan that covers everyone, and we are going to lower costs. Republican lawmakers don't know how they're going to do that, and by the way, those are not the talking points that they want to get out there as they work through to come up with a replacement plan, which they do not even have yet. So this is a big headache for, Republican lawmakers, and I think they're really seeing how sort of the stylistic maneuvers that they have gotten so used to during the campaign, really having that play out and having real political consequences on Capitol Hill.
I mean, just reading the conservative blogs on this, it's fascinating. Go online, read them. They're apoplectic, much angrier than I've ever seen any Democrat, I can tell you. Just go on those websites. They are ranting and raving about this. Ron, I have to turn to you, though, when you go through what we're calling this New World Order, and I mean, China was fairly reserved, not so reserved anymore in terms of coming out. I mean, Europe's doing its best to bite its tongue, but really, they're going to bite their tongue off pretty soon. When you look at a situation like, let's say, you're North Korea, and you think, okay, they're looking kind of vulnerable right now. Why don't we just cause some trouble next week? What do you think the Republicans are thinking about that, about a President Trump, facing that next week?
I'm not worried about the North Koreans. I mean, they have their own issues, they have their own problems. What I am focused on is I remember the first 30 days when I was in the Bush White House. I mean, it's a remarkable time of all the things that you campaigned on, all the promises that you made. You have a very quick turnaround time before people say, you know what, you made these promises, you didn't uphold them. So I'm looking at Trump from a foreign policy standpoint, and of course, who's the first person he's going to visit with is Putin. He needs to shore up our European allies and to make sure that they recognize the United States, we're still their stalwart ally, we're still with them, and I think that's the assurance they're looking for.
Okay. I mean, Ron may not be worried about North Korea, but there are a lot of sort of national security Republicans in D.C. and elsewhere who, see North Korea talking about a major missile test, and the idea of Donald Trump responding to that is not reassuring to them.
Unpredictable, and that's the problem. We're just going to take a quick break. Donald Trump has pledged to roll up his sleeves and get to work on day one. Well, come again, when is that? Is that Friday? Is that Monday? We're going to dive right in. Trump is planning to party through his first days in office. This possibly can't happen. We're going to talk about it when we come back. There's no way. Come on.
The man now is President of the United States. The debate is over. Everybody needs to grow up. We can only be attacked by the inside, not by the outside, and it's time for America to join together.
That was Tom Barrett, the chair of Donald Trump's inaugural committee, singing Kumbaya. Okay, he wasn't singing, but more than 1 in 4. 1 in 4 Democrats now in the House now say that they're going to boycott, and their ranks have been growing. Meantime, Trump isn't backing off his criticism of the man who ignited this whole thing, John Lewis. We are going to get back to our panel. I mean, Danielle, in the first instance, if you take Donald Trump's stand on this, if you take Tom Barrett's stand on this, this is about a peaceful transition. Why not just show up?
I think you're right, and I think that you can make arguments on both sides whether this is the right thing to do or not, because you lose your moral authority when you don't obey these norms, when you don't follow these norms of this, something like this. And we saw this with Republicans and Merrick Garland, this refusal to even, consider him. And I think that having the moral authority is helpful when you're governing. I think what Trump should do, and he did this with the Khans, and he did this with Melania and the speech, he drags these scandals out, and really he could have ended this. He could have ended this and extended an olive branch to John Lewis. But what we're seeing now is the snowball effect. He could have actually, I think, taken some advice from Martin Luther King, the letter from Birmingham jail, when Dr. King said, I don't have the time to answer all my critics, and if I did, I wouldn't do anything substantive. But because you're a reasonable man, let me answer you in the way that I can. So I think there's a lesson there, even though we're a little bit late for the weekend. But Trump has the power to stop this, ultimately.
Alex, do you see any change coming forth on this at all, or do you think this will be a lingering blemish on his inauguration, not just for him and the Republicans, but for the Democrats as well?
Oh, I think from the Democratic perspective, I think there are a lot of people in the party who, when John Lewis first made his comment about Trump being an illegitimate president, were not entirely comfortable with that. That was not, they didn't quite want to go there yet. Trump responds by going nuclear on John Lewis, who's this icon in so many ways. I think it did kind of stiffen the spine of a lot of Democrats, particularly on the left of the party, from folks from safe congressional districts.
So you're saying because he took a swipe at John Lewis, that's why this thing has momentum?
Sure. Trump has clearly taken the lesson from this election that 46% is all he needs in order to win and govern the country. When you look at the polls of his favorability approval rating so far, it's actually lower than 46%, and I think he's already running into the difficulties of governing as the sort of most limited of pluralities of the actual electorate supporting him. And, when Democrats, you mentioned Merrick Garland, right? Democrats look at what Republicans did to Merrick Garland, and the lesson they take away from that is they got away with it. Right? So why would we not do the same thing?
And they did. They're going to get their own Supreme Court nominee.
Right, and I think we do have to look sort of past Inauguration Day. Yes, it's sort of symbolically important and interesting that Democrats are going to be sitting out and not attending the next president's swearing in. But then what comes happens when, Capitol Hill comes back and members really need to get to work on creating legislation, Donald Trump needs to keep in mind, and I think this is what a lot of Republicans are thinking, that he is going to need some cooperation, some help from Democratic lawmakers to do really anything on Capitol Hill. He needs to get 60 votes in the Senate to move any kind of legislation. And so to come out this strongly against someone like John Lewis, that doesn't really set him up to get any goodwill from Democrats.
Now, talking about getting things done, we hear from his interview with The Times that Donald Trump isn't even going to be in the office on the weekend, that he's going to be inaugurated and then just take a break. We still have no confirmation as to whether or not that's going to happen. But Ron, what kind of he told The Times, look, is it going to be Friday? Is it going to be, no, we're starting on Monday. He's going to take the weekend off, his first weekend as president?
I find that shocking. I find it so hard to believe. I mean, he's campaigned and said, I'm going to get in there, I'm going to immediately roll up my sleeves, I'm going to do all these things, and then to go to Florida, I think would send a bad tone and a bad message to the American people. But I want to go back to what Danielle said a few moments ago, because I think it's very important when you look at moral authority, that Donald Trump had the opportunity. I think he could have picked up the phone, called Congressman John Lewis, had a nice conversation and said, you know what, I want to work with you, I understand your frustration, please come to my inauguration. He would have gotten so much more mileage out of that. But taking to Twitter and attacking someone who, as we all know, is an icon from the civil rights era is a mistake, and I think it sets a very churlish tone for him.
Alex, in terms of getting all of this together here, do you think that the Democrats, and we must say the Republicans are ready for him to actually start using those executive orders that he says he's going to use on day one? We don't know when that is yet. Could be Friday, could be the weekend, could be Monday. Do you think they're ready for it?
Are the Democrats ready for him to?
And the Republicans even.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of optimism on the Republican side that Trump, guided by Reince Priebus, guided by Mike Pence, will use the administrative powers of the presidency in ways that are advantageous to them. They're much, much more apprehensive about what it will mean to deal with him through the process of legislation and especially through the process of making international and foreign policy.
Gotta hold it there. Thank you so much. And never a dull moment, minute, day around here. There are just 3 more days until Donald Trump's